Hey everyone. When you look at an NHL slate like this, some games feel routine, but there are matchups that jump off the page because the line is already telling a story before the puck even drops. Tonight, we've got several of those. And when a number looks massive, uncomfortable, or straight up disrespectful, it's usually because the matchup underneath explains exactly why oddsmakers set it that way. So, let's break down these games the way we always do here on Beyond the Box Score, with real analysis, real matchup breakdowns, and sharp angles that give you the full context behind the action. Now, as always, before we dive into the breakdowns, it's worth reminding everyone that supporting the channel keeps these daily NHL analyses coming. Less than 25% of you watching are actually subscribed. If you find value in the analysis, if you enjoy the picks, and if you want to help the channel grow toward that 2,000 subscriber goal, currently sitting at 1272, hit that subscribe button. It takes 1 second, and it helps the channel in a huge way. Game 1. Detroit Red Wings Washington Capitals. We open tonight's breakdown with a matchup that looks clean on the surface but becomes far more layered the deeper you go beyond the box score. The Washington Capitals step into this game coming off a dominant 4-0 win against the Toronto Maple Leafs, a performance that carried added weight because the prior position on Washington in that matchup was labeled a 5-unit play. That context matters. A shutout is one thing, a shutout tied to maximum confidence is another. It speaks to structure, discipline, and a game plan that executed cleanly from puck drop to final horn. But Detroit does not arrive intimidated by recent headlines. They come into this game off a loss versus Utah, yet that single result doesn't define their current form. Before that loss, Detroit recorded wins over the Islanders and Chicago on the road, showing an ability to handle different environments and styles of play. This team is explicitly described as a very hot team, and that description is backed by numbers. Over their last 7 games, Detroit holds a 5-2 record, a stretch that signals consistency rather than volatility. The road element becomes impossible to ignore when examining this matchup closely. Detroit's road record this season sits at 96-2, a number that fundamentally alters how this game should be framed. Teams that perform at that level away from home don't rely on atmosphere or crowd energy, they rely on structure, execution, and adaptability. That road profile directly fuels the stated betting angle, value with Detroit, not as a prediction, but as a recognition of how their performance profile contrasts with market perception. Washington, as the opponent referenced, carries momentum, but Detroit carries sustainability. The line attached to this dynamic is the Detroit Red Wings moneyline plus 145, and the spread lean naturally emerges from the tension between Washington's most recent shutout and Detroit's longer sample of road success. From an analytical scenario standpoint, this game becomes a question of whether Washington can replicate a perfect defensive effort, or whether Detroit's road-tested identity forces this contest into deeper waters where execution matters more than momentum. Game 2. Philadelphia Flyers at New York Rangers. This matchup is shaped by pricing movement, situational fatigue, and expectation colliding at the same time. The New York Rangers enter favored across multiple numbers, -130, -135, and -140 at a couple books, reflecting both market confidence and belief in their home positioning. Yet the story isn't just the number, it's the path that led here. The Rangers are coming off a 2-1 overtime victory at St. Louis, a game that demanded patience, defensive structure, and the ability to survive extended pressure before closing. Despite that win, there's a notable trend attached to the Rangers this season: they have struggled to score at home. That struggle isn't dismissed, but rather framed as something expected to even out, suggesting regression rather than permanence. Compounding the Rangers' case is a key contextual note: they are believed to have the better goaltender in this matchup, a detail that often becomes decisive in tightly priced games. Philadelphia enters carrying weight from recent results. They've dropped 4 of their last 5 games overall, and this game marks their 4th straight road game. Extended road stretches have a way of magnifying fatigue, reducing margin for error, and exposing inconsistencies. This isn't just about wins and losses, it's about timing, recovery, and emotional wear. The line that anchors this narrative is the New York Rangers moneyline -130, and the spread lean centers on home ice combined with goaltending confidence versus a Flyers team navigating both recent losses and travel strain. From a broader analytical scenario, this game becomes a study in whether the Rangers' home scoring regression aligns with expectation, and whether Philadelphia can stabilize their play deep into a road-heavy stretch. Game 3, Edmonton Oilers at Minnesota Wild. This matchup is where numbers begin to argue with each other. Minnesota enters favored at -115, yet nearly every supporting data point introduces tension into that position. Edmonton's road record this season stands at 99-3, a figure that immediately reframes the idea of Minnesota being comfortably favored. That road profile signals a team that travels with confidence and consistency. Minnesota's overall resume is strong. Their season record is listed as 219-5, with a home record of 123-4, reinforcing their reputation as a difficult team to handle in their own building. And then there's the goaltending. Over their last 5 games, Minnesota owns a .940 save percentage and a 1.60 goals against average, numbers that define elite defensive performance. That recent stretch suggests a goaltender in peak form, capable of absorbing pressure and controlling game flow. Yet Edmonton brings firepower. They are averaging 3.4 goals per game this season, compared to Minnesota's 3.11 goals per game. That offensive differential matters, especially when paired with the player quality note that Edmonton faces. The best player there is in the NHL by far, a statement that elevates the individual impact factor within this matchup. The stated betting angle identifies Edmonton as the superior team, alongside a clear dislike of Minnesota despite record. The line reflecting that stance is the Edmonton Oilers -105, and the spread lean emerges from the clash between Minnesota's elite recent goaltending metrics and Edmonton's sustained offensive output plus road resilience. Analytically, this game becomes a referendum on whether defensive efficiency can neutralize scoring volume, or whether Edmonton's attack stretches Minnesota's structure beyond its recent comfort zone. Game 4, Chicago Blackhawks at Ottawa Senators. On paper, this matchup appears lopsided. Ottawa enters heavily favored at -260, backed by recent results that include back-to-back victories and 3 wins in their last 4 games overall. Their most recent performance, a 4-0 home win versus Pittsburgh, reinforces the perception of control and dominance when conditions align. But context reshapes that narrative. Prior to this recent surge, Ottawa had dropped 3 straight home games, with losses against the Rangers, St. Louis, and New Jersey. That stretch exposes vulnerability on home ice and raises questions about consistency. Chicago arrives not as a passive underdog, but as a team described explicitly as hungry. The Blackhawks are coming off a 3-goal loss at Montreal, but even that defeat carries layers. Before that, they were leading versus Toronto and blew the lead in the third period, a detail that signals competitiveness rather than collapse across full games. These moments matter when evaluating margin rather than outcome. The betting angle centers on the belief that Ottawa does not deserve heavy favorite status, and the line that reflects this perspective is the Chicago puck line +1.5 -125. The spread lean focuses on game flow, whether Chicago can remain within striking distance and force Ottawa to execute cleanly for a full 60 minutes. From an analytical scenario standpoint, this game becomes about pressure on the favorite rather than expectation on the underdog. Game 5, New York Islanders vs. Buffalo Sabres. We begin this stretch of the slate in Buffalo, where context and momentum collide in a way that often defines the outcome long before the puck drops. Buffalo enters this matchup favored 150-160 across all books, a range that immediately reflects growing market confidence. But that confidence is not built in isolation, it's rooted in recent performance and situational clarity. The Sabres are coming off a 5-3 victory against Philadelphia, a game that was described as a statement game, one that confirmed internal belief and external validation at the same time. That win didn't exist on its own either. Buffalo has now won 4 straight games, and the trajectory is unmistakable. Digging deeper, this Buffalo team is explicitly described as much better than their record indicates, yet even the record itself carries weight. They sit at 154-4 on the season, and when the focus shifts to home ice, the numbers become even more convincing. Buffalo is 105-2 at home, a profile that suggests consistency, structure, and comfort within their own building. These aren't abstract trends, they are repeatable conditions that shape how games unfold. The expectation attached to this matchup is clearly stated: Buffalo is expected to take care of business against the Islanders, with the narrative framed around continuation rather than correction. The line that encapsulates this confidence is the Buffalo Sabres moneyline -150, paired with the stated outcome angle of 5 straight victories. From a spread lean perspective, this game revolves around whether Buffalo's home form and current streak sustain their control, and analytically, any multi-game scenario discussion naturally treats Buffalo's home reliability as a stabilizing anchor rather than a volatile variable. Game 6, St. Louis Blues vs. Florida Panthers. This matchup presents one of the clearest contrasts on the slate. Florida enters favored between -160 and -170, and that range is backed by both recent results and broader form. The Panthers are coming off a 3-2 home victory against the Kings, a game that reinforced their ability to manage close contests. More importantly, Florida has been described as hot, having won 6 of their last 7 games overall. That's not a short spike, that's sustained execution. St. Louis, by contrast, arrives with a much heavier burden of proof. They carry a season record of 1-3-1-5-8, and away from home, they are 67-3. Those numbers frame a team that has struggled to impose itself outside its comfort zone. The qualitative assessment reinforces the quantitative one. St. Louis is described as honestly not a good team, a blunt evaluation that aligns with the road profile presented. The analytical framing here is direct. Florida is expected to control the matchup, and the line that reflects that dominance is the Florida Panthers. Moneyline -170. From a spread lean standpoint, this game is about Florida's ability to assert structure early and maintain it throughout. In broader slate scenarios, Florida's recent 6-1 run positions them as a momentum-driven piece rather than a volatile one. Game 7, Vancouver Canucks vs. Boston Bruins. In Boston, historical trend meets current positioning. The Bruins enter favored at -160, a number supported not just by present form but by prior matchups. Boston has won 4 of their last 6 games against Vancouver, a trend that establishes familiarity and psychological edge. That matters in hockey, especially when systems collide repeatedly. Vancouver arrives with confidence of their own, coming off 2 straight road wins, a detail that introduces tension into the matchup rather than diminishing it. Road wins often signal adaptability, but they also raise the bar for execution against a structured opponent. Boston is explicitly described as the superior team, and the expectation is clear: Boston gets the win here Saturday. The line reflecting that belief is Boston Bruins -160. From a spread lean angle, the narrative centers on whether Vancouver's recent road success can overcome Boston's historical and structural edge. In analytical scenario building, Boston's dominance in prior meetings functions as a stabilizing data point rather than a coincidence. Game 8, Pittsburgh Penguins vs. Montreal Canadiens. This matchup is defined by collapse versus control. Pittsburgh enters coming off a route loss against Ottawa 4, and the damage runs deeper than a single night. The Penguins have now dropped 7 straight games, with losses at Ottawa, at home against Edmonton, Utah, San Jose, Montreal, and Anaheim. The losing streak began against the Dallas Stars, and it has only compounded since. Despite that slide, Pittsburgh is described as hungry, but hunger alone doesn't reverse trends without structure. Montreal, on the other hand, enters with clarity and confidence. They are described as hands down the superior team, and they're coming off a 4-1 victory against Chicago, reinforcing their control on both ends of the ice. The line attached to this matchup is the Montreal Canadiens moneyline -150, and the spread lean flows naturally from Pittsburgh's extended losing streak versus Montreal's recent efficiency. In broader analytical discussions, Montreal's current form contrasts sharply with Pittsburgh's prolonged downturn, making this game more about sustainability than urgency. Game 9, Toronto Maple Leafs vs. Nashville Predators. This matchup is framed with minimal hesitation. Toronto is described as the superior team, and the stakes are implied clearly: if they can't beat Nashville, they've got big problems. That statement isn't tied to trends or records here, it's tied to expectation and baseline performance. The line that reflects this positioning is the Toronto Maple Leafs moneyline -130. From a spread lean perspective, this game revolves around Toronto meeting expectations rather than exceeding them. In slate-wide scenarios, Toronto functions as a test case for reliability rather than volatility. Game 10. Carolina Hurricanes vs Tampa Bay Lightning. This matchup introduces complexity through timing. Carolina is described as the superior team, yet the situation is labeled a tough spot. Tampa Bay enters having dropped 3 straight games, a stretch that often precedes heightened urgency. They are described as hit and miss, but the expectation is clear: Tampa Bay is coming in ready to play 100%. Contextually, Tampa Bay is coming off a 2-1 loss against Los Angeles, preceded by a 5-2 rout against Florida. Those contrasting results underscore inconsistency, but also ceiling. The line attached to this dynamic is the Tampa Bay Lightning moneyline plus 120. The spread lean centers on situational response rather than raw team strength, making this game about timing more than talent. Game 11. Seattle Kraken vs San Jose Sharks. This matchup is rich in situational data. Seattle enters with an away record of 57-3, and a season record of 12-14-6. San Jose, meanwhile, has been very good at home, holding a 106-3 home record. The head-to-head context adds another layer: these teams have split the meetings this season. San Jose won 6-1 at Seattle, while Seattle took the last meeting 4-1 at Seattle. San Jose enters coming off a 5-3 loss against Dallas, described as a very good Dallas team that will contend for the Stanley Cup. The belief here is rooted in home performance, with the line reflecting that stance: San Jose Sharks moneyline minus 120. The spread lean revolves around home consistency versus Seattle's road capability, creating a balanced but decisive analytical angle. Game 12. Vegas Golden Knights vs Calgary Flames. This matchup closes the slate with long-term belief meeting short-term pricing. Vegas enters favored at minus 140, a number described as very low given the perceived gap. Calgary has strung together a few victories, going 5-2 in their last 7 games overall, but the context of who they played is noted as a factor. Vegas is coming off a 2-1 overtime loss at home against New Jersey, and despite that setback, they are described as the superior team and a team that will contend for a Stanley Cup this season. The line reflecting that belief is the Vegas Golden Knights moneyline minus 140. From a spread lean standpoint, this matchup is framed around long-term quality outweighing short-term fluctuation. Game 13. Columbus Blue Jackets vs Anaheim Ducks. The final matchup is defined by location. Anaheim has been good at home this season, 100%, and has dominated teams at home, while struggling on the road. They enter favored at minus 120, a number described as low. Columbus enters with just 1 victory in their last 6-7 games overall, signaling sustained struggle. Goaltending metrics reinforce the gap. Columbus owns 8.812 save percentage over their last 5 games with a 2.83 goals against average, while Anaheim holds 8.896 save percentage over their last 5 games. The line attached is the Anaheim Ducks moneyline minus 120, with the spread lean rooted firmly in home dominance versus recent defensive inefficiency. Overall, this slate is packed with intriguing matchups where defense, shooting efficiency, and free throw opportunities could determine outcomes for those looking to bet smart and follow expert analysis. The emphasis on matchups, historical context, and statistical edges provides a clear roadmap. At Beyond the Box Score, we break down every angle, every stat, and every trend so you can step into your bets with confidence and clarity. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and stay locked in for the most detailed, analytical, and actionable daily breakdowns in college basketball.